Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. This is part 2 of the July Q&A. I think we had part 1 go out yesterday, so you should probably go back onto the channel and check that one out if you haven't already, but we'll be answering a ton more questions in this one, so let's get straight to it.
Part 2. Okay, this next question, I'm just skimming through. It's quite a long one, and it actually looks like it's one for you, Tim, so you can read the question so you'll understand it a bit better and go for that one.
Okay, so this person's asking you about the rise in popularity of adaptive sync monitors, and I think still people are a bit confused about how important they are. A lot of people on forums saying gaming is absolutely impossible or horrible without these technologies, and we know this isn't true. However, there isn't any evidence to counter this. If you were using an NVIDIA card, as most people do, with a FreeSync monitor at 144 Hz and no adaptive sync, realistically, how bad will the experience be without adaptive sync? So, it's an interesting question because I have said in the past that if you're using an NVIDIA card with a FreeSync monitor, so long as you're running at frame rates that are near the sort of 144 Hertz range, that the experience is very similar whether you have adaptive sync on or off.
Yeah.
The only thing adaptive sync does is it either reduces your stuttering because you would normally be running VSync on, or alternatively, it reduces your tearing if you have VSync off. So you're less likely to notice stuttering and tearing at high frame rates. So if you're running at like 100 FPS on a high refresh panel, like 144 Hertz. So if you're running at like 100 plus FPS on 144 Hertz, in some games, it's not going to be super noticeable, either the stuttering or the tearing that you would get running with VSync on or off. So in which case, then if you have an NVIDIA card running on a FreeSync monitor, the difference isn't going to be that much between that and an AMD card that can make use of adaptive sync.
Yep.
So I definitely disagree that if you're at those frame rates that the experience is horrible without that technology. It's really very similar. You might notice it, you might not. I think the main advantage comes if you're running at 70-ish FPS below to around 40 FPS. That's the real golden zone for your adaptive sync. So if you have an AMD card there, it'll be much smoother and much less tearing will be noticeable during that sort of frame rate range. So,
which is what makes FreeSync, in my opinion, a good technology, because it's free, so you can get cheap monitors, take advantage on affordable graphics cards. Whereas I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really get the point of G-Sync.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for NVIDIA cards and specifically for high resolution monitors like 4K. If you're gaming 4K and you're sort of wanting to play at ultra, you're in that sort of 40 to 60 zone, it'll seem a lot smoother playing at 40 on G-Sync compared to on a FreeSync monitor.
Yep.
But for a lot of gamers that are preferring those high refresh, high frame rate experiences, honestly, as someone that's used a lot of these monitors and has used FreeSync on NVIDIA cards and all that, honestly, if I'm playing above 100 FPS, there's very little difference. You might get the occasional game that, tearing is really noticeable, and then that's really bad. But otherwise, just game with VSync off and you'll be almost the same sort of experience.
Cool. Well, that was a video in on itself.
Yep. So is there going to be a huge difference upgrading from DDR4 2133 to DDR4 4133? And is it worth upgrading?
Wow. Not messing around there. That's what almost 100%, 94% increase in
that's right.
memory frequency.
It's huge.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you're able to take advantage of, well, first of all, 2133 is very low. Like realistically, you're probably buying 2400 is probably the slowest memory you're going to buy, 2066. So, but anyway, we're even from 2666 to over 4000. That's a huge jump. For gaming, you're unlikely to see that translate into extra frames unless you're doing like some sort of really insane high refresh rate gaming. For memory sensitive applications, yes, that will be of benefit, but you really have to make sure that you can use it, because I think the cheapest 4000 plus kits or 4133 kits, you're looking at around $200 for a 16 gigabyte kit, whereas 16 gigabyte kits of any frequency start at about $130. I think that's like your 2400 stuff that I mentioned earlier. I think that's about as slow as it goes. So that it's really not worth it for that price increase unless you have some sort of memory sensitive application that you're running that you'll notice like a really big boost in performance. And also, I mean, you have to take into account that most CPUs can't support that. Well, when I say most of the Intel CPUs probably can on an unlocked board, but I don't know if there's a Ryzen I
don't think so.
I mean, I've used second gen Ryzen at 3600. I haven't got any memory that goes above that, so maybe someone can correct me in the comments if Ryzen CPUs go up to 4000, but to my knowledge, they don't. So anyway, I've sort of meandered around a bit here, but to answer your question, I don't think it's worth it. You're better off getting, I think 3200 is probably the sweet spot. You're paying about, only about $20 or $30 over the base memory for not the low latency stuff, but yeah, I'd be aiming for DDR4 32 to 3400. That probably makes the most sense in terms of value. Okay, next question. Is it sensible to purchase a Pascal card right now? Tim and I just talked about this on the Patreon live stream, so Tim should be armed with plenty of information to handle this one. I currently own a classified 980 Ti and was waiting for the next gen to arrive. All I've seen so far is nothing but rumors. I hope you saw our joke video because that was hilarious. So if I buy a 1080 Ti, would it be a bad buy or should I just wait more? Do a bit more waiting.
Yeah, so...
What is it, Tim?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, a 980 Ti, it's still a very capable card. It's around the same level of a GTX 1070.
Yep.
You'll be playing at 1440p with no problems, and you can get some nice overclocking performance out of that as well. Get like a 20% boost or so. But like I said in my recent video talking about MSRP cards and the pricing of cards at the moment, it sort of makes sense to wait if you're in that sort of upper end bracket at the moment, because like your only real option, as you say, is upgrading to like a 1080 Ti to get a decent performance improvement. And then those are the cards that are most likely to be upgraded first.
That's right,
when NVIDIA releases their next gen cards. So at this point, unless you're buying like a 1060 or those sort of more entry level cards, it really makes sense to wait to see what NVIDIA has, because like I said, they're going to update those 1070-ish level cards and above first. So
we have no inside information, but there's a good chance within the next few months you'll be able to get 1080 Ti performance for a lot less money.
Yeah, so we saw the 980 Ti become the 1070 in the last generation. If they do anything similar, you'll just be, at this point, like almost wasting your money buying a 1080 Ti if they're just going to offer that for like half the price.
Yeah.
Not that we know, but that's what they did last time.
If you were desperate for a graphics card, you're running something that's much slower than a GTX 980 Ti, then we would say, yeah, look, the prices have come down. It's probably not a terrible time, and you'll get at least a few months of good gaming that you wouldn't have got otherwise.
Will a 2700 and an RX 580 4GB be enough for gaming and streaming at 1080p 60 FPS? Pretty simple one here, Steve.
Yeah, well, I could answer that with a simple yes, I suppose. But, well, the Ryzen 7 2700 is perfectly fine CPU for streaming. You wouldn't want to do... I suppose with that configuration, you wouldn't want to do any GPU encoded streaming because there's no point. So you might as well get the maximum performance you can out of the GPU or let the CPU do the work, because there should be a few threads on the Ryzen 7 CPU sitting around doing nothing. So streaming will give them something to do. We've talked about this, Tim and I, a bit about different streaming configurations and stuff, and hopefully next month
I'll be tackling that one.
Tim will tackle that one in a lot more detail for you.
Yep.
But in short, All right, next up. Would an i7 6700K be enough to drive all GPUs coming in the future? Get your crystal ball out. So a GTX 1180 Ti is an example, so 1180 Ti and beyond. So Tim, what does your crystal ball say?
I think it will be enough to drive the next generation of GPUs, especially if you overclock the CPU. But like with all these sort of things, beyond that, it's pretty hard to say. It's likely going to be good for some time to come, but you know, because it has 4 cores and 8 threads. But you know, if you have a 6700K, certainly hold on to it for now. This time next year, there could be some more attractive options with higher core counts. But I think, at least for next-gen GPUs, you should be fine with that sort of CPU. All right, Shoff asks, I have a 290X with a Ryzen 7 1700. Would it make sense to move to an RX 580 or Vega 56 when they go on discount, or wait for their next lineup? I have a FreeSync monitor. That's why I'll stay with AMD. What do you reckon?
Now, we've answered a few questions similar to this, not exactly like this. Okay, well, basically the R9 290X, apart from being still a very capable graphics card or GPU, it's not really worth upgrading to the RX 580 because they're pretty similar in terms of performance. You'd have to saturate the 4GB VRAM buffer of the 290X to see the RX 580 pull ahead by any sort of noteworthy margin. So what else we got? Vega 56 was the other one.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a decent step up in terms of performance from a 290X. Not massive, but it's decent. I mean, it's similar to how the RX 580 and Vega stack up. But again, we're pretty certain we're getting those new NVIDIA GPUs in a few months. So, I don't know. That's a tough one. I Again, probably someone asked about the GTX 980 Ti, and I think this is a similar situation. The R9 290X is still a very capable graphics card. So for now, I would probably just settle with tweaking your quality settings, tuning them up. You did mention the FreeSync monitor. Sorry, I just scrolled back and saw that. So the NVIDIA cards coming up soon won't be of interest because you want to keep your FreeSync support. So in that case, you're going to just have to wait for AMD to pull their finger out. I think it's March.
I think unless you go for like a Vega 64, then a lot of those other cards...
Yeah, they're too expensive for what they're offering.
So, again, you'll probably be waiting until next year.
Yeah, you'll be waiting until next year to see what they do then, and hopefully they do something exciting. Are there any infos on motherboard support for Intel's 8-core CPU? Can a Z370 handle it, or will Intel come around the corner with another excuse to make people upgrade again? Keep up the good work, guys. Thanks. Keep up the good questions. But yeah, thank you. And we talked about this in quite a bit of depth on our Patreon live stream. So Tim and I had some strong opinions on that one, but I'll let Tim give his...
Yeah, I think like with all sort of future products, again, we don't really know at the moment, but yeah, we do know that they are going to replace the Z370 with Z390 because Intel's actually leaked their own documents about it. So we kind of already know all the features. We're still uncertain whether Z370 or Z390, what will be the support there for 8-core CPUs. I think Z390 will definitely support 8-core. And
yes,
I would suspect at this point that Z370 won't support 8-core.
Ugh.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's where it's kind of heading. And knowing Intel, they love to update their motherboard support like that. It would be a shame, though, if the rest of the 9th gen CPUs weren't supported on Z370 at all. It seems like they're basically just 8th gen CPUs with slightly faster clocks. So if they're not supported on Z370, that would be a bit of a mess, I reckon.
Yeah, catastrophic mess. Let's hope that isn't the situation.
Okay, so Neil has asked a long one here. I'm going to summarize it briefly, but basically it comes down to, will you ever do triple monitor benchmarks instead of 1080p and 4K? Triple monitor builds, it was a niche market 3 to 5 years ago, but not anymore. I'm not sure triple monitor is more than a niche market like it was. I think it's fairly similar to 3 to 5 years ago. In fact, I'd even think it's probably even less popular now that ultra-wide monitors are a thing. Because, for example, I used to run a triple monitor setup. I had 3 1080p monitors. Yep. But as soon as those 21.9 1440p monitors became available, I upgraded to that, and I think the experience is actually better. So for most people, I'd recommend using 21.9 over your triple monitor setup. I think back in the days when we were sort of doing triple monitor stuff, you could quite easily sort of infer your sort of performance that you're going to get from either your 1080p or 4K benchmarks. Like, it won't be exact, but for example, if you've got a triple 1080p setup and you're wondering if your GPU can run a game, if you can run it at 4K, it'll run it at triple 1080p.
Pixels are pixels is what you're saying.
So yeah, basically pixels are pixels. So I think because it's so niche, it's probably not something we'd be looking at testing too much. We'd stick to the sort of standard resolutions that people are actually using. But like what I do with 21.9 and like with what a lot of people do with triple monitor, you should just be looking at sort of those sort of inferences that you can make from the testing we do provide. But I like triple monitor testing. I like triple monitor gaming. I like ultra wide. So it's still nice and good for racing games, as you've mentioned.
Well, that's it. I do enjoy racing games. I don't have too much time to play them, but I've played a bit of F1 2017. Great game. Enjoy that. As for the peripherals, the wheels and that, I don't know if we're sort of have the sort of expertise to do those kind of reviews justice. Like I said, I enjoy playing around with them, but yeah, I don't feel comfortable sort of giving people buying advice on that kind of hardware. We'd have to spend a lot of time and energy and investment, I think, to do that justice. So might not be something you'll see from us, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm sure there's enthusiast racing people out there that will tell you which ones of those are the best.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have Ryzen 5 2600 and a B350 motherboard. Should I upgrade to X470 or stick with my B350, or maybe you have another advice?
Would that be a B450 board, which is pretty much, as far as I can tell, a B350 board?
Yep.
To answer your question, not really. I don't think there's much point unless there's a feature missing on your B350 board. Maybe you bought a really low-end B350 board. It doesn't have some sort of features that are on the X470 boards. I can't really think of any other reason to recommend it. Performance-wise, you shouldn't be missing out on anything there. Again, unless it's a really entry-level B350 board and perhaps you're doing some sort of overclocking that it's not allowing you to max out your CPU. But
But then again, he has a Ryzen 5 2600. That would be more of a problem, I think, on the Ryzen 7 CPUs. But
that's true.
overclocking on B350 with Ryzen 5, I think, has been fine for most people.
Yeah, look, I've got nothing for you. I can't think of any reason why you should be, apart from the fact, like I said, if there's some sort of feature you're missing on the B350 board. But, yeah.
Okay, so next question is, I was wondering, since AMD made obviously a great deal about Ryzen on laptops, how come that we barely see notebooks in any shape or form on the market? Can it be related to dubious marketing practices enacted by Intel over the years, or is it just a segment on the market that simply lost traction? It's hard to say what sort of happened with Ryzen laptops. There's been a few that have been announced, but it seems like they've either been pretty slow to hit the market, or they're just not available in certain territories, and there's not a lot of options. I'm not necessarily sure whether it's, dubious marketing practices by Intel. It's just Ryzen in laptops is a very new segment that's been utterly dominated by Intel for the best part of a decade.
They've been absent for too long.
Yeah, and especially with pre-built systems that, a company like Dell or HP, whoever is making, they tend to be just stick with what they know, especially because, they've often designed motherboards that they use for generations. They design cooling solutions that are appropriate. So I think it's just a situation where, on the desktop front, people can do whatever they want and they can just buy whatever processor that's good, whereas on laptops, it's still just, trying to gain a bit of adoption there, and they're still trying to break into the market. So hopefully we see more laptops, and some of the laptops that exist actually reach the market.
I think by this time next year, it'll be much different.
Yeah, I think once we start to get into the new laptop season, which is towards the end of the year usually, when Intel releases their new processors, hopefully we'll have a bit more competition between Intel offerings and Ryzen offerings in the same sort of form factors. That'd be really cool.
Serious question time. Can you do a backflip on camera? Well, short answer to that one, not if you want to see any benchmarks next week.
Hey Steve, which AIO would you recommend for a Threadripper CPU 1950X, or would it be best to use a custom loop cooling solution versus air cooling for overclocking usage in productivity workloads? So what do you use?
Okay, well, custom loop cooling, so that's, I assume he means open loop.
Yeah, I would think so.
So, I mean, that's hugely expensive, totally different. It's chalk and cheese. So if you want an open loop system, you can't really compare that with air. But for Threadripper 1950X, it's overkill anyway, because they don't overclock that well. They're not bad. So I have the NMAX LickTech. LickTech. So I've got that. It's the TR4 version naturally, and I have the 280mm version. So that's an all-in-one liquid cooler. It also comes in 240mm and 360mm versions. So that's really good. I love that it's got a huge block on it. So that's made obviously for the TR4 socket. Also made for the TR4 socket is the Noctua air coolers. So they have some really good air coolers. I've also tested some of those. I think in terms of performance, the all-in-one liquid cooler and the Noctua air coolers are very similar. I'm not sure which one's better there. I think maybe the all-in-one liquid cooler is a smidgen better. I'm not sure. It's probably doesn't justify the price increase, but I really like it anyway, the LickTech. Okay, some business ideas here. Any collaboration ideas with Dollar Shave Club? I think you guys are perfect for it. What's he trying to say? Steve from GN is already taking advantage of his fabulous facial hair structure and making some profit to support the channel. Are they doing Dollar Shave Club at Gamers Nexus?
Oh, I don't know. Probably.
Yeah, who knows? I've missed it if they are. Well, yeah, sure. I don't know. Sign us up.
Yep.
Sounds like fun to us. And a bit of money.
All good.
Both good.
Okay, so IB Slice has asked a really good question in our Discord chat for our Patreons. He says, or she says, when you guys bench, it's always in a controlled setup. In reality, most of us have many apps running and sometimes things like a Plex server in the background. How much of a performance hit can that cause, and what apps may be the worst that affect the CPU or GPU? So I think a lot of the time when you're sort of gaming in particular, you're not really utilizing things like your CPU or memory at 100%. So running things like, a Plex server can be intensive if it's doing its encoding stuff, but other things like, Chrome or Discord or chat apps or even just running Steam and that sort of thing has very little performance impact.
Depends what you're doing in Chrome, but yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. But I think you wanted to do some testing on this and sort of put this to bed once and for all.
Well, I don't think I'm that naive, but I'll give it a go. I would like to do some testing on it. It's difficult. Gamers Nexus had a shot at it and basically concluded that it's too inaccurate, which
Yeah.
makes sense. I think at least putting to bed like how much Chrome, 50 Chrome tabs open, how much impact that does have, which should be nothing. If you're watching a 4K YouTube video, that introduces some CPU overhead. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to look into. So that's something we'll do in a future video. And I always IB slice. Is it
IB slice?
IB slice or IB slice? Anyway, it's a
slice.
male. So sorry, mate. Not Sal Kagan. No.
Not Sal. Okay,
Not
so
like-
Sal asks, what were the specs of the first PC you guys ever built and how long ago was it? This must be freaking ancient stuff for you.
Why do these always come up? Can we just... well, I've said it before on these Q&As, but Sal is a relatively new and relentless member. It was a Celeron... Well, my personal computer. My parents bought computers that I used as a kid, but my first ever computer that I built was an Intel Celeron 300A. Overclocked it to 450, 475, something like that. So that's megahertz for you kids watching single core stuff. That was on an A open motherboard. Remember we had this A open
Yeah,
A
the
bit,
open stuff.
I
Yeah.
have to relive all this every time. Can we just cut that from the previous Q&A? So it was on an A open motherboard. I had a 16 megabyte Voodoo Banshee AGP. Can't remember the storage. It was a beige case.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah, I had an first PC I built was like an Intel Celeron E2100 series, I think.
So that's Core 2 Duo days, isn't
Core
it?
2 Duo days,
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of days. And I put in a Radeon HD 4850. I think that was the first.
Oh, wow.
That was the first PC I built. Obviously, again, my parents had
I remember
computers and
reviewing
stuff.
that not that long ago.
Yeah, it was more than 10 years ago, to be fair.
Doesn't feel that long ago.
But yeah, I had some PCs that I'd upgraded before then that would sort of more that my parents had bought, but that was the first one I'd built by myself. I think I had like maybe 2 or 4 gig of RAM in there, and man, I was so proud of myself when that thing was up and firing and playing games like Fallout 3. It was
I was
great.
I was on Windows 98 playing Command & Conquer Gold or something like that. I think it was 98.
yeah, ages ago.
ME wasn't that far after.
I was barely born.
What operating system was on yours? Vista or something?
Yeah, it could have been Vista. Yep. And that's it for this month's Q&A video. We've got 2 videos out already filled with questions. I hope you guys enjoyed some of our responses over the past couple of videos. As always, don't forget to subscribe. We do these every month, usually, if we can be bothered to get around to it.
We do it every month. Come on. We're not that
All right.
slack.
All right, fair enough. We do them every month, so subscribe for that. And I guess we'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.